blood cancer. The discoveries made in blood cancer research have led to breakthrough treatments for many cancers and other serious diseases. When we walk, cancer runs. Join the movement to end cancer today. Visit us at lightthenight.org.
The trade war escalates. Stocks slumping after China struck back in its trade dispute with the U.S. What's next?
Yuan sinking to the weakest in a decade.
And how will it affect the markets?
Red across the Bloomberg screen.
Today's the worst day of the year for the S&P 500.
The latest headlines from around the globe.
China is acting to limit the yuan's plunge.
The U.S. is formally labeling China a currency manipulator.
Stay with Bloomberg 1130, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Emily Chang.
Over the course of a decade, Laszlo Bock helped Google grow from 6 to 72,000 employees, 6,000 to 72,000. During that time, Google was recognized as a top employer over 150 times, racking up titles like Best Company to Work For in the United States, though, of course, the company has received more scrutiny recently. Now, Bock is bringing his Google learnings to other companies with his startup Hulu. Hulu uses machine learning and artificial intelligence to nudge managers and employees toward behavioral changes, all with the goal of creating a happier workplace. Joining us now to discuss for our Work Shifted series, Hulu CEO and co-founder Laszlo Bock. So you're using AI to identify behavioral changes, to give employees nudges to help them be better versions of themselves. What exactly does that mean in practice?
Well, what it means is, if you step back, it's hard for organizations to change, and it's hard for managers to be good managers, and it's hard for employees to be good team members, to feel safe, to feel secure. And our idea, which so far has been working pretty well, is that if you better understand what's going on with the people in an organization, at the team level, at an individual level, they want to be better. They want to learn and grow. So small interventions, small reminders that we call nudges to a manager, to a team member, to a colleague, actually can drive more behavioral change for the good than all the training in the world.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and TikTok on Twitter. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters here in London, I'm Caroline Hepker with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. So central banks, New Zealand, India and Thailand all cut interest rates in surprise moves as global easing spreads. The RBNZ slashed by 50 basis points. That sent the Kiwi tumbling along with the Aussie dollar on speculation that the RBA may follow that move. Currently, the Kiwi dollar down 1.6%, the Aussie dollar weaker 0.5%. In Europe, the US stock 600 gained 0.7% this hour. European shares are back near February levels, but volatility is up too. We've also had plenty of earnings. Glencore down 2.4% currently after the weakest profits in 3 years. And Commerzbank and UniCredit are amongst those warning that the trade war and low rates in Europe means a threat to earnings. As for US futures, they've turned positive, up 0.2% this morning after a pretty mixed session in Asia. The US dollar is steady on the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index. The Japanese yen climbs 0.2%. US yields have decreased, hitting the lowest level in almost 3 years when it comes to the benchmark 10-year yield, 1.68%, down 2 basis points. Right now, we had those comments from Fed Chief Bullard indicating he's still in favour of 0.5 percentage point of easing by the end of the year, so perhaps not as dovish as some had expected. And not forgetting, of course, the US-China trade spat. The yuan fixing remains in focus. The reference rate was set marginally stronger than 7 per dollar. Currently, we trade at 7.07 for the offshore CNY. So that is a little look at the markets. That's the Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Garrett with more on what's going on around the world. Good morning.
Good morning, Caroline. North Korea has been accused of hacking into both traditional and high-tech financial systems to funnel cash into its nuclear weapons program. A UN report says Pyongyang has amassed about $2 billion of financial institutions and crypto exchanges. The panel also says Kim Jong-un has about 30 agents working overseas, controlling bank accounts and money transfers. An explosion has rocked the Danish capital of Copenhagen. It happened last night near the offices of the country's tax authority, destroying part of the facade and smashing windows in neighbouring buildings. No one was injured, but the explosion, which the government has called a deliberate act. And I'm about to bust a lifelong myth. It's claimed drinking coffee or tea within 4 hours of bedtime does not affect your sleep. Researchers in America tested the effects of caffeine, alcohol and nicotine consumption on sleeping patterns. They found while smoking and drinking was indeed disruptive, caffeine seemed to have no impact on the amount of time volunteers spent asleep. Global News 24 hours a day on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg. Matt.
Thank you very much, Leanne Gerrans. I want to go over to somebody who I'm sure was doing all the right things before bed last night because he's up so early at 7:31, Lex.
I got a thing or two to say about caffeine.
What?
I drop like a light every night. It helps to get up at 2 a.m.
Yes, in the morning, but at night,
Yes.
The idea is that at night you can drink caffeine and still sleep.
Well, when you're up this early, sleep is not a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you got ahead for us?
Definitely not asleep right now. We are looking at what comes next in the U.S.-China trade war, Matt. The yuan weakening again with the daily fix just barely on the strong side of 7. And now some traders are getting it in mind that oil could be the next target in China's back and forth with the U.S. as Brent has been toying with a bear market. And on top of all this, we got the 3 big surprise rate cuts from Asia-Pacific central banks. Will that have any sway on the Fed? We're going to check in with Michael Hewson of CMC Markets, get his insights on that. Plus, we'll have more on Disney, the big earnings miss. Geeta Ranganathan of Bloomberg Intelligence will join us for analysis. And as President Trump gets ready to visit the 2 cities hit by mass shootings over the weekend, why he might not get an entirely welcome reception in El Paso and Dayton. All that and more coming up with me and Karen Moscow, both of us highly caffeinated this morning on Bloomberg Daybreak. Hope you'll join us, Matt.
I'm looking forward to it, and I'm sure everyone else is as well. Nathan and Karen coming up with Daybreak out of New York. If you're listening on Sirius XM, if you're listening on London DAB Digital Radio, you'll hear Bloomberg Surveillance.
Right, let's talk about some of the things that were mentioned there by Nathan in terms of the things that are moving markets. And we're going to start with the low interest rate environment and how that narrative is building, including through the Asian session overnight. Let's bring in John Normand, Head of Cross-Asset Fundamental Strategy at JP Morgan Chase. Good to have you with us, John. Let me get your thoughts then as we see the New Zealand Central Bank cut, more than expected, the RBI cut, the Bank of Thailand cut. You know, none of these maybe from a global perspective move the dial very much, but they do add to this narrative that we're seeing global central banks increasingly dovish and at a sort of increasing pace, I guess. How much can that offset, though, the headwinds that the global economy faces?
I don't think they can offset the headwinds very much, because when you're cutting rates from a very low level, then you have less scope by definition for rates to decline and stimulate overall financial conditions. So to me, if you're going to see a turnaround in the global economy, it's got to be from some truce in the trade war and rollback of the tariffs. Eventually, it's not going to be from a handful of rate cuts, especially not rate cuts from small central banks.
So is it then a fool's errand for example, Mario Draghi to go even further into negative territory?
I don't think completely. I think these central banks believe that doing something is better than doing nothing. And I do think that if they were to cut interest rates again, and as they relaunch the asset purchase program, just the reduction in spreads, reduction in rates is going to support equity markets to a limited degree. It may not give you above average returns in those markets, but if it just keeps equities from going down, that at least prevents a very unhelpful tightening of financial conditions through that channel.
Yeah, there is no alternative. Seems to have cropped up in a couple of conversations about what central banks do in response to the trade tensions. John, so where does that leave equity markets and indeed other risk assets? Because since we've seen, I mean, trade tensions are not new now, are they? And the market seems to periodically focus on them, and they seem to, and trade tensions seem to periodically intensify. Do you think that the level of tension is fully reflected in asset prices, though? Because we see equities not far from all-time highs.
No, the the impact of the trade war on the global economy is not reflected in asset prices. There's still this belief that central bank easing is going to restore growth to the trend pace and restore earnings growth to kind of high single digits by early next year, and that's what's keeping asset prices at this elevated level. But I think the more trade tensions ratchet up, the further out in time this eventual return to earnings growth and GDP growth becomes, and that's where you get the scope for markets to go down. So my base case is that the best outcome for risky markets over the next 6 months is they trade a range. Eventually you'll get some central bank response. Eventually you'll get some stability and growth, but I don't have any confidence that's going to come in the next 3 months, 4 months, and that's why I think your best case is that they go sideways.
So how do you make money in the meantime? I mean, I'm looking around and I can borrow at incredibly low rates, but all the assets I want to buy seem to be trading at incredibly inflated prices.
So they are very expensive, and I think that drives why investors should have very modest return targets. I think it's unreasonable to expect more than kind of mid to high single digits on global equities over the next 12 months. But even if you were only looking at a market that would return mid single digits, that's still a lot better than you'd earn in the bond market. So the absolute return story is still pretty grim. I think the relative return story is a little more encouraging, but there's no way to kind of sugarcoat this. You're in a very old business cycle with stretched valuations and limited policy mechanisms for restoring growth. That tends to add up to kind of unimpressive returns.
And a very low yield on the US 10-year, 1.67 is where we stand at the moment. John, how low does that get?
I think if Trump follows through on his threat to raise tariffs on September 1st, I think you could hit new all-time lows on 10-year treasuries, because that sort of tariff hit probably pushes the U.S. economy, into sub-trend growth territory. And I think that warrants another couple of cuts this year, and that's what could give you a new all-time low on 10-year U.S.
When you look at U.S. stocks versus European or in general, just risk assets, U.S. versus Europe versus Asia, where do you see the best opportunity?
I think it's the U.S. only because despite everything that's happening on the trade front, the U.S. is still delivering growth slightly above trend, and that's not something you can say about any other major economy or big emerging market economy. And that translates into a slightly firmer path on earnings, and there's obviously a buyback dimension, which is very unique to the U.S. stock market. So I prefer the U.S. in relative terms, but it's only because of this kind of slight resilience you're seeing in the economy.
What do you and do you think that the US broadly, the stock markets in the US, are they going to broadly stand aside from the trade tensions, or are they going to be very much caught up in it? Does the trade tension come back to hurt US corporates?
Well, it is doing that. It is the trade tensions are the reason why profits growth has slowed so materially this year, and it's also the motivator for any negative guidance that you tend to hear out of US corporates. So the feedback loop is definitely alive. It's just that because the starting point of the US economy was stronger than a lot of these other economies had going into 2019, that's why you're getting more outperformance out of the U.S. relative to some of these other stock markets. But there's no way for the U.S. to directionally decouple from what's happening with respect to trade and growth around the world.
John, thanks very much. John Normand, Head of Cross-Asset Fundamental Strategy at JP Morgan Chase.
And he will be headed out to the Bloomberg surveillance set, so you can catch him. If you're listening on London DAB, you'll hear more from John Normand. If you're in the U.S. and you want to check him out, just type TVGO on your Bloomberg terminal. I'm heading over to the Commerzbank Towers to interview the CFO, Stephen Engels, and ask him about this European economy. Can we see a resilient enough economy here to keep his business growing? This is Bloomberg.
Traffic and weather every 15 minutes on Bloomberg 1130. Good morning. I'm Peter Van. Problems in Queens. You have a collision on the Jackie Robinson Parkway. It's eastbound just as you make your way past Cypress Hill Street. Looking pretty good LIE, not too bad Grand Central Parkway. You have work on the BQE westbound Brooklyn Bridge over towards Atlantic Avenue, and a couple lanes are knocked out on the Belt Parkway eastbound Pennsylvania Avenue, right back over towards Erskine Street. Not a bad start. George Washington Bridge, all your outbound and upper level construction has been cleared. The inbound side, that lower level, easy pass until 6. Same for your approach with the Palisades Interstate Parkway. You're looking pretty good, both the Lincoln and Highland tunnels. Still construction if you're Bronx-bound with the RFK Triborough Bridge. In town, you have work on the FDR Drive if you're heading downtown, the 20s, right back over towards Houston Street. Not a bad start on the West Side Highway. You're looking pretty good. Garden State Parkway, same for the New Jersey Turnpike, alternate side in effect today. We're at 74 degrees, Central Park, Bloomberg 1130. 3-day forecast. Clouds, some sunshine, showers, thunderstorms, and some can be very gusty today with a high 85 to 90. Coming partly sunny for tomorrow, still a chance of an afternoon shower or thunderstorm, 85 to 90. Partly sunny Friday, near 85. With the best ride in Angeles City, this is Bloomberg 1130. Bloomberg Daybreak up next.
From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at TikTok on Twitter. This is WBBR New York, Bloomberg 1130.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Wednesday, August 7th, 2019. Coming up this hour.
China's currency weakens as the PBOC's reference rate heads closer to 7.
Central banks across Asia cut interest rates in the face of trade tensions and a global slowdown.
U.S. oil is now seen as the next trade war target as Brent crude enters a bear market.
President Trump travels to grief-stricken El Paso and Dayton today. Plus, Kim Jong-un says North Korea's latest missile test is a warning to the U.S. I'm Michael Barr. More ahead.
I'm John Stashower in sports. Mets and Yankees keep winning. Mets shut out the Marlins. They've won 12 of 13. The Yanks stretched their win streak to 7 with a victory in Baltimore.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. U.S. futures and European stocks are gaining with central banks in focus this morning. We're coming up to 5:01 on Wall Street, and we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are up 9 points. Dow futures up 72. NASDAQ futures up 42. The DAX in Germany's up 1.2%. CAC in Paris up 1.1%, and the FTSE 100 is up 0.7%. Nikkei 225 in Japan was down 0.33%, while the Hang Seng in Hong Kong little changed, up less than 0.1%. 10-year Treasury up 7/30 seconds, yield 1.67%. Yield on the 2-year 1.56%. NYMEX crude oil down about 0.2% or 9 cents at $53.54 a barrel. COMEX gold up 1% or $14.40 to $14.9860 an ounce. The euro 1.1189 against the dollar, and the yen is at 106.25. Nathan.
Karen, we begin with the People's Bank of China setting its daily reference rate for the yuan just barely below 7, and that has the currency weaker this morning. Stephen Cochran is Chief Asia Pacific Economist at Moody's Analytics.
I suspect from now on that the currency will stay close to 7. It gets difficult if it gets much higher in terms of trying to protect against capital outflows. To be able to offset all of the tariffs, they'd almost have to go to 8, and I don't think that's in the cards at all. So I think keeping it close to 7 and also making it clear that the PBOC is in control, I think that's what they're trying to show right now.
Analysts are now looking to tomorrow's fixing as a key signal from the PBOC. The offshore yuan is weaker this morning at 707.49 per dollar.
Oil could be the next target in the trade war, with some expecting China to start avoiding U.S. crude imports. We get more from Bloomberg's James Thornhill.
There's a concern that China might now start boycotting U.S. crude. Now, they could source it from somewhere else, but it does feed into those broader concerns about demand destruction if this trade war continues and the sort of impact that's going to have on global demand for crude.
Oil is swinging between gains and losses this morning after Brent crude fell into a bear market yesterday. Checking prices now, NYMEX crude oil down 0.2% or 11 cents at $53.53 a barrel. Brent is down 0.2% at $58.82.
And as trade tensions rise, gold pushed back past $1,500 an ounce. It's trading near its highest level in 6 years as investors seek havens and central banks begin cutting rates. Right now, COMEX gold is at $14.9830.
And central bank easing is a major theme in Asia today, where we got 3 rate cuts. Bloomberg's Stephen Engel joins us from Hong Kong with the details. Good morning, Stephen.
Well, good morning, Karen. New Zealand, India, and Thailand all cut rates more than expected. Asian stocks traded fairly mixed, though, as investors continue to weigh the U.S.-China trade tensions. New Zealand stocks surged 1.9%, and the Kiwi dollar fell more than 2% after the central bank there cut rates by 50 basis points, and the Reserve Bank governor signaled the possibility of negative rates. Now, the Aussie dollar tumbling, too, to the lowest since 2009 on speculation it could follow. Well, Indian stocks fluctuated between gains and losses as the RBI there cut rates by 35 basis points and reduced its annual growth forecast. And Thailand then followed with its own rate cut, 25 basis points, when most analysts had expected the central bank to stand pat. In Hong Kong, I'm Stephen Engel, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Stephen, thanks. Back here in the U.S., there are signs the Federal Reserve might not cut rates as fast as traders anticipate. For that, we're joined live by Bloomberg's John Tucker. Good morning, John.
Yeah, good morning, Nate. St. Louis Fed President James Bullard is pushing back at suggestions the central bank needs to lower rates to soften the impact from the trade war.
The nature of a trade war is that you have tit for tat going on all the time. It is not reasonable for monetary policy to respond to all these threats and counter threats.
In addition, Bullard expects the negative impact of the trade war on the global economy will remain for quarters and years ahead. A voter on the Federal Open Market Committee this year, Bullard says he likes Chairman Jerome Powell's comparison of last month's quarter-point rate cut to a mid-cycle adjustment. John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, John, thank you. Lower interest rates are taking a toll on banks in Europe with weak earnings from Commerce Bank and UniCredit today. Bloomberg's Sebastian Salick joins us live from London with the very latest. Good morning, Sebastian.
Good morning, Karen and Nathan. Commerzbank says its goal of lifting profit this year is looking increasingly ambitious after revenue fell for a fourth quarter. The lender also set aside more money for soured loans. Meanwhile, UniCredit cut its revenue target amid a struggle to spur growth. Sluggish European economies and the sale of an online banking unit took their toll on the lender. I'm seeing Commerzbank down by 4.8%, and I'm going to bring you a check on UniCredit as well. That stock is down by 4%. Live in London, I'm Sebastian Salick, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Sebastian, thank you. Shares of Glencore are down nearly 2% after the mining company reported the weakest profit in 3 years. CEO Ivan Glasenberg cites a challenging economic backdrop for the poor performance.
Shares of Walt Disney are down 3% in early trading after earnings missed estimates. Theme park attendance fell despite opening its highly anticipated Star Wars Galaxy's Edge attraction in California. Bloomberg's Chris Palmieri has more from Los Angeles.
Bob Iger gave a surprising mea culpa. He said, we tried too hard to limit attendance because we thought crowds were going to be so big. They had a reservation system for the attraction. They'd never done that before. Everybody in Anaheim raised hotel prices, including them, he said. So people just stayed away. And the same thing at Walt Disney World in Florida. He said people were staying away because they're waiting for that Galaxy's Edge to open later this month.
Disney's earnings also took a hit on poor performance from its newly acquired Fox assets. At the same time, it announced pricing for a new bundled streaming service. For $13 a month, Disney will offer customers its Hulu, ESPN Plus, and Disney Plus services, all launching this November. And futures this morning are higher, with S&P futures up 7.5 points. Straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news. And this is Bloomberg.
All right, Karen, thank you. It's 5:07 on Wall Street, and Michael Barr is here with more on what's going on around the world. Michael, good morning.
Thank you very much, Nathan. Good morning. President Donald Trump will seek to console the grief-stricken residents of El Paso and Dayton today. It comes after last weekend's mass shootings that left at least 31 people dead. Bloomberg's Bob Moon reports there is local reluctance over the president's visits.
The president and first lady plan to pay tribute to emergency responders in both cities and pray with victims' families and survivors, according to White House spokesman Hogan Gidley.
He also wants to talk about potential solutions.
The visits are complicated, though, by Trump's anti-immigrant rhetoric, blamed by Democrats for helping incite the El Paso attack, and his resistance to gun control measures demanded by local politicians, including Dayton's mayor, Nan Whaley. She says she'll welcome Trump in her official capacity as mayor, but also supports those who don't approve of his visit.
I think that people should stand up and say they're not happy if they're not happy that he's coming.
Bob Moon, Bloomberg Daybreak.
There was panic in Times Square last night after people started scrambling when they heard what they thought was gunfire. It turned out to be the backfiring of a motorcycle. This man was in Times Square when it happened.
All of a sudden, I heard like this kind of muffled pop, and I was like, oh, what was that? And I looked over, and there was just like a sea of people running. And I had about 1 or 2 seconds to like think, oh, is this really happening? And it was just a sea of people running, and I just started booking it.
The NYPD wants to assure the public there was no active shooter and Times Square is very safe. Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden remains the front runner in a Quinnipiac University national poll. The former vice president drew 32%. It looks like the race for Queens District Attorney is officially over. Public defender Tiffany Caban has conceded the Democratic primary race more than a week after Queens Borough President Melinda Katz was declared the winner. Last night, Caban told her supporters that she conceded after a review of the disputed ballots did not impact a slim lead held by Katz. Kim Jong-un said North Korea's latest missile tests were intended as a warning against ongoing U.S.-South Korea military exercises. North Korean state media said today that Kim personally oversaw what allied military officials said was a pair of short-range ballistic missile launches a day earlier, the fourth such volley in 2 weeks. Global news, 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
All right, Michael, thank you. 5:09 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. Here's John Stashak.
Nathan, the Mets and Yankees continue to feast on last-place teams. The easy schedule, certainly one factor in the Mets' hot streak. Outstanding pitching, another. A staff ERA since the All-Star break of under 3. It was Zach Wheeler last night in a 5-0 win over the Marlins. So for Mickey Callaway's Mets, that's 12 wins in the last 13 games.
We understand that, who we've been playing, but that doesn't matter to us. We try to win every single game every day. And if we take that approach, you really shouldn't worry about your opponent. We're worried about ourselves playing the game the right way, the camaraderie that we have in the clubhouse. And if we do that, we have enough talent in that room to beat anybody.
Day game today at Citi Field, day off tomorrow. Then the schedule does get tougher. Big home series this weekend with the Washington Nationals in Baltimore. The night after the Yankees hit 5 home runs, they hit 6. 3 by guys who had homered the night before. Brett Gardner, Austin Romine, and the sizzling hot Mike Tauchman. Also Didi Gregorius, Cameron Maben, and DJ LeMahieu. 9-4 wins stretches the Yankee win streak to 7. 14 wins in a row at Camden Yards, and in 9 games there this season, they have now belted 38 home runs. The Zeke Elliott holdout from Cowboys camp getting more serious with a report that his agent has told the team Elliott will not report to camp until he gets a new contract and that he is prepared to do what another running back, Le'Veon Bell, did last season in Pittsburgh, not play at all. With the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update, I'm John Stashak. Nathan?
All right, John, thank you. The new stadium at Hollywood Park that's being built for the Los Angeles Rams and Chargers has its first corporate sponsor. The L.A. Stadium and Entertainment District at Hollywood Park says American Airlines will be a founding partner and the naming rights partner for American Airlines Plaza. The stadium is scheduled to open next July. Ahead of the open on Wall Street, futures are pointing higher. S&P futures up nearly 7 points. Dow futures up 51. NASDAQ futures higher by 36 points. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak. And just before 5:12 on Wall Street, what is the next move in the U.S.-China trade war? We check in next with Michael Hewson, Chief Market Analyst at CMC Markets, as Bloomberg Daybreak continues. Good morning.
Bloomberg Daybreak Asia.
I'm Doug Krisner. Is the yuan breaking 7 against the dollar a sign of more weakness to come? And how much has the U.S.-China trade war elevated the risk of a global recession? Tonight at 6 on Bloomberg 1130. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Hey, New York, now that summer's here, warm up to NYCB's free checking with e-statements offer. That's right, free as in free unlimited check writing. Free of monthly service charges, free of minimum balance requirements, and free of per-check fees. Best of all, it comes with the convenience of a free Visa debit card and free online banking and bill pay. Want even more from your checking account? Then look no further than the NYCB family of banks. In the New York metro area, the NYCB family of banks is comprised of banking leader New York Community Bank and its divisions, Queens County Savings Bank, Roslyn Savings Bank, Richmond County Savings Bank, Roosevelt Savings Bank, Atlantic Bank, and Garden State Community Bank. For details, visit us at mynycb.com. New York Community Bank, member FDIC, equal housing lender.
And New York Community Bank.
More than
isn't just a game, baseball is big business. For the chief revenue officer of the New York Mets, this means overseeing complex operations, key financial drivers, and interpreting data to make critical decisions every day.
How is your business managing complexity? Cohn Resnick can help you improve performance through an integrated business planning strategy that optimizes your data, streamlines processes, and keeps you ahead of the competition. Explore more at cohnresnick.com/MLB. Cohn Resnick, Advisory Assurance Tax. Transform your game.
Losing your hair? Thanks to the pioneering innovations at Bernstein Medical, robotic hair transplants now use your own hair to create natural, permanent results. The board-certified dermatologists at Bernstein Medical's Center for Hair Restoration will give you a careful and honest evaluation before recommending the best course of treatment. To schedule a consultation with us at our Midtown Manhattan facility, visit bernsteinmedical.com, a world leader in robotic hair transplants.
When is a pencil more than a pencil? When it takes me from art class
To gallery walls worldwide. Staples is your back-to-school destination. Find all the supplies and inspiration you need. Come in store this week for our 15 and 25 cent deals. Now, Staples one-subject notebooks are just 25 cents each, and 2 pocket paper folders are only 15 cents each. Staples, back to school and beyond. In-store only. Offer ends 8/10/19. Limit 5 on paper folders, limit 30 on notebooks, while supplies last.
Forever Wild, the Chapin Estate.
Eagles soar over hardwoods. Trout jump in a quiet cove. Springs bubble to private ponds. Spectacular sunsets reflect in a 9-mile lake.
Estate-sized sites for your custom Adirondack-style home designed and built by Chapin Construction.
Forever Wild, the Chapin Estate, 100 miles from Manhattan, Bethel, New York. 866-311-8196. ChapinEstate.com.
Bloomberg Surveillance.
This is Tom Keene.
And I'm Jonathan Farrow.
The correlations of the market wrapped around the dollar. John Norman joins from J.P. Morgan.
Today at 7 on Bloomberg 1130.
Bloomberg, the world is listening.
It's 5:15 on Wall Street, and it's time for Land Rover Drive Time Traffic. Visit your tri-state area Land Rover retailer for special lease and finance offers. Land Rover, above and beyond. Good morning, Peter Van.
All right, good morning, Nathan. Not too bad a start. Still some construction. Garden State Parkway northbound out of the Union Tolls up towards exit 144. And you have to work both ways on Route 287, exit 57 towards 59. Covered roadways still closed down both ways in Jersey City. And the work in Secaucus takes out a couple lanes both ways on Route 3. Meadowlands Parkway right back up towards the Turnpike Eastern Spur. Looking pretty good. Camera shots, George Washington Bridge, Lincoln and Holland Tunnels, and no big problems to report with the East River crossings. Once you're in town, little work, FDR Drive southbound 20s down towards Houston. Be quiet with the West Side Highway. Couple lanes are knocked out in Brooklyn on the Belt Parkway eastbound Pennsylvania Avenue over towards Erskine Street. And also on the BQE, there's construction westbound from the Brooklyn Bridge right back over towards Atlantic Avenue, alternate side, in effect today. Report is sponsored by LifeLock with Norton. LifeLock with Norton Security is the identity theft protection and device security that you need against cyber threats in today's connected world. You can join at LifeLock.com. Use promo code RISK for 10% off your first year. 75 degrees, Central Park, Bloomberg 1130. 3-day forecast. Clouds, some sunshine today. Watch out for these gusty showers and thunderstorms. 85 to 90. Going to be partly sunny tomorrow. Again, afternoon shower or thunderstorm. 85 to 90. Partly sunny Friday and a high of 85. This is Bloomberg 1130. Bloomberg Daybreak continues.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at TikTok on Twitter. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow, and currencies are in focus with the New Zealand dollar tumbling after a bigger-than-expected rate cut and the yuan dipping after China's central bank said its reference rate slightly weaker than expected. Bonds are extending gains while stocks climb. The U.S. dollar is steady. The 10-year Treasury yield is falling through 1.7% as German and U.K. rates drop to records. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. Right now, S&P futures are up 7 points. Dow futures up 56. NASDAQ futures up 35. The DAX in Germany is up 1.2%. 10-year Treasury up 7/32, yield 1.67%. The yield on the 2-year 1.56%. NYMEX crude oil down 0.4% or 23 cents at $53.40 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 1% or $15.30 at $14.9940 an ounce. The euro 1.1184 against the dollar. The British pound 1.2139. The Aussie dollar 0.6729 against the dollar. And the yen is at 106.24. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. 5 days after a gunman murdered 22 people and wounded 27 more at a local Walmart, President Trump will visit El Paso, Texas this afternoon to offer his support. This morning, the president will visit Dayton, Ohio, where 9 people were shot and killed Sunday. Kim Jong-un said North Korea's latest missile tests were intended as a warning against ongoing U.S.-South Korea military exercises. North Korea has taken escalating steps in recent weeks to show its frustration with the U.S.'s refusal to meet its demands in nuclear talks. In baseball, the Yankees won their 7th straight after downing the Orioles 9-4. The Mets have won 12 out of their last 13 games after beating the Marlins. The Red Sox lost. The Nationals beat the Giants 5-3. The A's won. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
All right, Michael, thank you. It is 5:19 on Wall Street and live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak. Our guest this morning, Michael Hewson, Chief Market Analyst at CMC Markets. We continue to wait for the potential next step in the U.S.-China trade war. We're seeing a bit of relief in European and U.S. markets this morning. What do you see coming next, Michael?
Yeah, I think really that's the big question, and I think that's why we're seeing a little bit of a pause, if we can call it that, in the trade tensions. I mean, I was struck by comments that Larry Kudlow made yesterday with respect to the ongoing negotiations. He said that U.S. officials remained ready to sit down with Chinese officials next month with a view to getting the tariffs removed. But there's a sequencing problem with that narrative, and the sequencing problem is these tariffs kicking on the 1st of September. So they really got to need to talk to each other before the 1st of September for those tariffs to come off. Now, I did note that China once again kept its fixing below that key 7 level. So I think that was particularly notable because it suggests that they're not in any mood to ratchet up the tensions. Nonetheless, from what I'm seeing here today in Europe, we are seeing a rebound. It is very, very welcome. But we need to put it in the context of the declines that we've seen over the past few days. What we're also seeing, though, is investors are hedging their bets because you're seeing flows into safe havens like US Treasuries, German bonds, UK gilts, and gold prices, which are at a 6-year high.
Yeah, we're seeing the 10-year below 1.7 now at a 1.67 handle. I mean, how much further could Treasury yields fall?
Well, we could go back to the record lows that we saw, a few years ago, around about 1.32%. If you look at Fed fund predictions, they're projecting potentially 110 basis points of further U.S. rate cuts between now and the end of next year, which I find quite incredible when you set that against what James Bullard said in comments yesterday when he said that he felt that he didn't see the need for a further rate cut in September. And I think those comments, Nathan, that Bullard has made are very, very significant because if you look back over the course of the past 5 years, James Bullard has always been a leading indicator when it comes to potential Fed policy moves. In 2016, he was one of the first US policymakers to call for rate hikes, well ahead of an awful lot of the other policymakers on the FOMC committee. He was also one of the first policymakers to break ranks calling for a Fed rate cut earlier this year. So I think his comments are interesting in the context of what to expect next. Now, he did caveat that by saying that as long as the data holds up, he sees no reason to act in September and the facts could change. But I think he is a very important bellwether for Federal Reserve policy going forward. And in that context, I thought that yesterday's comments were very interesting in the context of the US-China trade narrative.
Do you see these deep cuts that we saw from the Asia-Pacific central banks having any effect on the data, and could that sway the Fed in some way?
I think they certainly could. I think what was interesting was the fact that the RBNZ felt the need to cut by 50 basis points. And again, the Indian Central Bank by 35. But it goes back to, again, what Philip Lowe, the governor of the RBA, said earlier this year. He said that these rate cuts would only be effective if other central banks didn't do the same thing. So that suggests to me that it's a reflex action on the part of central banks. One person cuts, it creates a domino effect. I'm not really sure what these central bankers are trying to achieve, because the net effect, if everybody cuts rates, is zero. Okay, you may make monetary conditions slightly looser, but there has to be a demand for that cheaper credit. And given the fact that we're seeing German yields at record lows of minus 0.82% for the 10-year, which is 42 basis points below the ECB deposit rate, and the 2-year, the 10 years minus 0.577 and the 10 years minus 0.82. I got my numbers mixed up then, but you get my general point.
Yeah. Michael Hewson, Chief Market Analyst, CMC Markets. Got to leave it there for now, but thanks as always for being with us here on Bloomberg Daybreak. And just getting a snapshot of the markets at the moment. The futures on Wall Street are moving higher. S&P futures nearly 7 points ahead. Dow futures up 52. NASDAQ futures up 34. And talking of the move to safety, COMEX Gold is now right at $1,500.60. Gets you an ounce of gold on the COMEX. You are listening to Bloomberg Daybreak. At 5:25 on Wall Street, if you stay with us, you'll hear more on Disney's earnings mix, plus a broader check of the markets and all the latest news in business, economics, and finance. I'm Nathan Hager. This is Bloomberg.
Is your brand growing? Products and services selling? Is your advertising making an impression, sparking sales, educating customers? Many brands today are undermarketed, not because budgets are too small, but because advertising is poorly planned. Your agency must identify a clear objective, create a solid strategy, and target the right audience. It must research the competition, leverage your unique selling proposition, craft a comprehensive, measurable multi-platform media plan, and populate it with smart creative. Bluetooth Creative Group, a leading metro area advertising and marketing solutions provider, is an expert at producing strategic, effective advertising, from broadcast, print, and collateral to digital, social, retail, and sales promotions, so your brand promise can generate sales. Bluetooth Creative Group. Learn more at bluetoothcreative.com.
All money managers might seem the same, but while some give their clients cookie-cutter portfolios, Fisher Investments tailors portfolios to your goals and needs. Some only call when they have something to sell. Fisher calls regularly, so you stay informed. And while some advisors are happy to earn commissions whether you do well or not, Fisher Investments fees are structured so we do better when you do better. In other words, we're on your side. Maybe that's why